Aloha Jivas! I am really looking forward to 2022 for myself, especially as I've been planting a lot of seeds that I hope to see blossom this year. And one of those things that I've always wanted to do is to read the Bhagavad Gita on my Instagram channel here. So I figured today is a great opportunity to start, being that we are starting a new year fresh. And so today I'm going to begin with an excerpt from the introduction. And the Bhagavad Gita that the Krishna devotees reference is Bhagavad Gita as it is, which has the purports or the explanations of the verses written by Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupad. And he's considered the foremost authority on the Song of God, or which is the translation of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so the excerpt from the introduction. Let's see here. Okay. Just what is the Bhagavad Gita? The purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to deliver mankind from the nescience of material existence. Now, I had to Google what the word nescience means, and that refers to ignorance, basically, the not knowing. Every man is in difficulty in so many ways, as Arjuna also was in difficulty in having to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. Arjuna surrendered unto Sri Krishna, and consequently, this Bhagavad Gita was spoken. So we're referring to the setting of where this took place about 5,000 or so years ago, when Krishna was manifest on the planet in his full form, and Arjuna was his cousin, and there was a great battle, the greatest battle in all of mankind history, that took place in a place called Kurukshetra in India. And the Mahabharata is the story of that. If you're interested in learning about that, that would be your reference. And so actually the Bhagavad Gita is part of the larger Mahabharata story, because this takes place during that time, during the battle, the battle which pitted family members against each other. And so that was, what Arjuna was, found himself in a very difficult situation, not wanting to fight against his own family that he loved very much. So anyway, back to the introduction excerpt. Okay, so where are we? Every man is in difficulty in so many ways, as Arjuna also was in difficulty in having to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. Arjuna surrendered unto Sri Krishna, and consequently, this Bhagavad Gita was spoken. Not only Arjuna, but every one of us is full of anxieties because of this material existence. Our very existence is in the atmosphere of non-existence. Now that really struck me. Let me repeat that. Our very existence is in the atmosphere of non-existence. So what does that mean? Like, who we are really, like what exists, the I that exists is not this body, but it's an eternal spirit soul that uses this body as a vehicle. And many different bodies over many different lifetimes. So this, what did it describe? Okay, so our very existence, which is eternal, even though we were forgetful of that, is in the atmosphere of non-existence. So where we're at in this material world, all of these things in this material world are only temporary. There's nothing here that is eternal. Everything will eventually break down. Our bodies, your car, trees, everything has this cycle of birth and death here in the material world, but our souls are eternal. And so now having to be in this body, in this atmosphere of non-existence, is that what it says? Atmosphere of non-existence is very bewildering for us. So to continue, actually we are not meant to be threatened by non-existence. Our existence is eternal, but somehow or other we are put into Assat. Assat refers to that which does not exist. Out of so many human beings who are suffering, there are a few who are actually inquiring about their position as to what they are, why they are put into this awkward position, and so on. Unless one is awakened to this position of questioning his suffering, unless he realizes that he doesn't want suffering, but rather wants to make a solution to all sufferings, then one is not to be considered a perfect human being. Humanity begins when this sort of inquiry is awakened in one's mind. So as we begin to question why we are here, as we begin to consider what it's all for, what exists beyond this life, that's when we are tapping into our bigger potential as human beings. That's when the humanity within us that separates us from the other animals and the other living entities. It's what makes humans special. In the Brahma Sutra, this inquiry is called Brahma Jigyasa. Every activity of the human being is to be considered a failure unless he inquires about the nature of the absolute. Therefore, those who begin to question why they are suffering or where they came from and where they shall go after death are proper students for understanding Bhagavad Gita. The sincere student should also have a firm respect for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a student was Arjuna. Lord Krishna descends specifically to reestablish the real purpose of life when man forgets that purpose. Even then, out of many, many human beings who awaken, there may be one who actually enters the spirit of understanding his position, and for him, this Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Actually, we are all followed by the tiger of nescience, but the Lord is very merciful upon living entities, especially human beings. To this end, he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, making his friend Arjuna his student. Being an associate of Lord Krishna, Arjuna was above all ignorance. But Arjuna was put into ignorance on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, just to question Lord Krishna about the problems of life, so that the Lord could explain them for the benefit of future generations of human beings and chalk out the plan of life. Then, man could act accordingly and perfect the mission of human life. So sometimes when we forget something, it's because God wants us to forget something, right? We never know the mysterious will of the Lord. And so that was what was played out on the battlefield. The subject of the Bhagavad Gita entails the comprehension of 5 basic truths. First of all, the science of God is explained, and then the constitutional position of the living entities, or jivas. Jivas refers to the individual spirit souls that we all are. There is Ishvara, which means controller, and there are jivas, the living entities, which are controlled. If a living entity says that he is not controlled, but that he is free, then he is insane. the living being is controlled in every respect, at least in his conditioned life. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matter deals with the Ishvara, the supreme controller, and the Jivas, the controlled living entities. Prakriti, or the material nature, and time, the duration of existence of the whole universe, or the manifestation of material nature. And karma, so prakriti, time, and karma, which karma refers to activity, are also discussed. The cosmic manifestation is full of different activities. All living entities are engaged in different activities. From Bhagavad Gita, we must learn what God is, what the living entities are, what Prakriti is, what the cosmic manifestation is, and how it is controlled by time, and what the activities of the living entities are. Out of these 5 basic subject matters in Bhagavad Gita, it is established that the Supreme Godhead, or Krishna, or Brahman, or Supreme Controller, or Paramatma, you may use whatever name you like. Okay, so this is not about my God, your God. There is one God, and God goes by many names, and so it doesn't matter what you call him or her. The living beings are in quality like the supreme greatest of all. The living beings are in quality like the supreme controller. For instance, the Lord has control over the universal affairs, over material nature, etc., as will be explained in the later chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Material nature is not independent. She's acting under the directions of the Supreme Lord. As Lord Krishna says, Prakriti is working under my direction. When we see wonderful things happening in the cosmic nature, we should know that behind this cosmic manifestation there is a controller. Nothing could be manifested without being controlled. It is childish not to consider the controller. For instance, a child may think that an automobile is quite wonderful to be able to run without a horse or other animal pulling it. But a sane man knows the nature of the automobile's engineering arrangement. He always knows that behind the machinery there is a man, a driver. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is a driver under whose direction everything is working. Now the jivas, or the living entities, have been accepted by the Lord, as we will note in the later chapters, as his parts and parcels. A particle of gold is also gold. A drop of water from the ocean is also salty, and similarly, we the living entities, being part and parcel of the Supreme Controller, Ishvara or Bhagavan, Lord Sri Krishna, have all the qualities of the Supreme Lord in minute quantity, because we are minute Ishvaras, subordinate Ishvaras. We are trying to control nature, as presently we are trying to control space or planets, and this tendency to control is there because it is in Krishna. But although we have a tendency to lord it over material nature, we should remember that we are not the Supreme Controller. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita. So that's where I'm gonna finish for today. And I think that last sentence sums it up with the essence of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and the root, or the seed, I should say, that I have planted my intention for this Remember and Surrender Instagram page, which is a reflection and extension of who I am and the work that I do and offer in service to divine love, and my desire to spread and share divine love with all of you. But the title that I use, Remember and Surrender, is really the crux of it all. And so when we remember who we are and who we are in relationship to the Supreme Controller, to God, then and then surrender that control, then we will see so much open up in our life, because it's very freeing. It may seem like the opposite, having to surrender control to somebody else, but this is not that kind of relationship. This is your ever well-wisher that is ever present inside your heart, next to you, closer to you than the air you breathe. And so as you foster that relationship, remember and surrender to the love that's there, then only good things can come. And even if sometimes things don't feel so good, then hindsight is 2020. But for today, I want to wish you happy 2022. Aloha. Haribol.